For much of the 20th century, China lagged far behind the world's industrial leaders when it came to advanced manufacturing capabilities, particularly in sectors like shipbuilding. Yet following the conclusion of the Second World War, and especially after opening up to market reforms, China embarked on an ambitious journey to modernize its technological and industrial base. Within just a few decades, Chinese shipbuilding prowess has evolved to the point where it now rivals and in many metrics surpasses traditional maritime powerhouses like South Korea and Japan. What was once a three-way competition has transformed into something unprecedented. Industry analysts predicted as early as the beginning of 2024 that China might achieve complete dominance over the global shipbuilding sector. Then came a development that caught even seasoned observers by surprise. South Korea, a nation that had held the crown as the world's premier shipbuilder for 2 decades, placed orders for 22 massive cargo vessels with Chinese shipyards, representing a contract worth approximately $2.7 billion US. This remarkable reversal has sparked intense debate across the maritime industry. Some commentators interpret these orders as a symbolic acknowledgement, South Korea effectively conceding defeat to its Asian rival in a sector it once dominated without question. But the reality behind this shift is far more nuanced than simple victory or defeat. It's a story of economic forces, technological breakthroughs, strategic miscalculations, and the relentless march of industrial evolution. So what compelled South Korea to turn to Chinese shipyards for its maritime needs? How did China's shipbuilding sector transform from an afterthought into a global juggernaut? And what does this transition tell us about the broader shifts taking place in the world economy? To understand where we are today, we need to rewind several decades and examine how South Korea first rose to maritime prominence. South Korea's golden era, 2 decades of dominance. The 1980s marked the beginning of South Korea's ascent in global shipbuilding. The country's yards began demonstrating remarkable efficiency and technical capability, combining advanced metallurgy with cutting-edge welding techniques. By the turn of the millennium, South Korean shipbuilders had achieved what seemed impossible just 20 years earlier. They overtook Japan, the previous industry leader, to claim the top position in worldwide ship production. What followed was an extraordinary period of South Korean supremacy. For approximately 20 years, Korean shipyards maintained a technological stranglehold on the most sophisticated segments of the maritime market. Their expertise in steel fabrication and precision welding created barriers that competitors found nearly impossible to breach. During this golden era, few nations could meaningfully challenge South Korea's leadership. The country's major shipbuilders, Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, became household names in maritime circles. But as South Korea's dominance grew, so did awareness among other nations about the strategic and economic importance of shipbuilding capacity. Countries around the world began viewing maritime manufacturing not just as an industrial sector, but as a matter of national security and economic sovereignty. Among these nations, China would prove the most determined to break into the elite club of shipbuilding powers. China's long road, from salvaged wrecks to modern yards. China's shipbuilding story begins in 1949 at the founding of the People's Republic. At that time, the country's maritime manufacturing capabilities were virtually non-existent compared to established powers. The initial years were characterized by humble beginnings, salvaging sunken vessels from waterways, constructing basic civilian craft, and relying heavily on technical assistance from the Soviet Union to build even rudimentary capabilities. Throughout the Cold War period, Western technology embargoes meant that China had to develop its shipbuilding know-how largely in isolation. It wasn't until 1978, as China began its historic economic reforms, that a complete industrial ecosystem for shipbuilding truly began to take shape. Even then, the gap with leading nations remained enormous. Japanese industry experts at the time were dismissive, with some publicly stating that Chinese shipbuilding technology lagged behind global standards by at least 25 years. One particularly harsh assessment claimed that no one would purchase Chinese-made garbage ships. These weren't just offhand remarks. They reflected the genuine gulf in capability between China and the world's maritime leaders. Rather than becoming discouraged by such criticism, Chinese policymakers and engineers used it as motivation. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, massive investments flowed into shipyard infrastructure, worker training, and research and development. The strategy was clear: learn from the best, invest relentlessly, and play the long game. By 1995, China achieved its first major milestone, surpassing Germany in total shipbuilding output. This was significant progress, but China still ranked only third globally, well behind the South Korean and Japanese giants. The most prestigious and profitable segment of the market remained frustratingly out of reach. The LNG challenge, breaking through the final barrier. The crown jewel of commercial shipbuilding in the late 20th and early 21st century was the liquefied natural gas carrier, LNG ships capable of transporting natural gas cooled to minus 160 degrees Celsius. These vessels represented the pinnacle of maritime engineering, requiring sophisticated insulation systems, specialized materials, and precise construction techniques. The global energy industry's growing appetite for natural gas made LNG carriers extraordinarily valuable, and they commanded premium prices. South Korea and Japan had established a virtual duopoly over LNG carrier construction, zealously guarding the technical know-how required to build these complex vessels. They imposed strict technology transfer restrictions, ensuring that the most lucrative contracts remained within their exclusive domain. For China, this represented not just an economic obstacle, but a technological humiliation, being locked out of the industry's most advanced sector. Chinese engineers spent years attempting to reverse engineer and develop indigenous LNG carrier technology. Finally, in 2008, China successfully launched its first domestically built LNG carrier. This breakthrough shattered the Japanese and South Korean technical monopoly and announced China's arrival as a comprehensive shipbuilding power, capable of competing across all vessel categories. The year 2008 proved to be a watershed moment for multiple reasons. China's total shipbuilding completion volume reached 30 million deadweight tons, capturing 30.7% of the global market. Japan held 27.5%, while South Korea commanded 33.6%. While South Korea still led, the margins were narrowing rapidly. Even more significant were the new order figures, which indicated future market direction. China secured orders totaling 60.55 million tons, representing 38.3% of all new global contracts. Japan managed only 11.5%, while South Korea took 44.1%. These numbers revealed that in terms of new business, the leading indicator of industry momentum, China had already surpassed Japan and was rapidly closing the gap with South Korea. By 2009, China achieved another historic milestone. For the first time, Chinese shipyards received more new vessel orders than their South Korean counterparts, claiming the world's #1 position in this crucial metric. The global shipbuilding landscape had fundamentally restructured itself into a new configuration, with China, South Korea, and Japan as the recognized Big Three, but with China's trajectory clearly pointing upward. The stunning reversal: South Korea orders from China. Given this history of intense competition, what happened in December 2023 seemed almost unthinkable. At the China International Maritime Exhibition, South Korea's Hyundai Glovis, a major logistics subsidiary of the Hyundai conglomerate, announced an agreement to purchase 12 automobile carriers from Guangzhou Shipyard International, a Chinese state-owned enterprise. The contract value approached $1.5 billion, with deliveries scheduled between 2026 and 2027. These weren't ordinary cargo ships. Hyundai Glovis specified pure car and truck carriers capable of transporting 10,800 vehicles each, powered by dual-fuel LNG propulsion systems. This represented some of the most advanced maritime technology available, combining massive capacity with environmentally friendly fuel systems that meet increasingly strict international emission standards. That a South Korean company would turn to Chinese yards for such sophisticated vessels sent shockwaves through the maritime industry. The surprises didn't end there. Even before those initial 12 ships were completed, Hyundai Glovis returned to Chinese shipbuilders with additional contracts. In 2024, they placed orders for 10 more car carriers, worth approximately $1.2 billion, with planned delivery dates extending through 2029. In total, 22 large vessels contracted to Chinese yards by a single South Korean firm. This dramatic shift demands explanation. How did the relationship between these two shipbuilding nations transform so completely that South Korea, which had spent decades as the world's undisputed leader, now found itself purchasing ships from the very country that Japanese experts once dismissed as incapable of building anything worthwhile? The perfect storm: South Korea's shipbuilding crisis. To understand South Korea's current position, we must examine the multiple crises that have battered its shipbuilding sector over the past several years. The problems began around 2018, when a confluence of factors created what industry insiders describe as a perfect storm, threatening the viability of South Korean yards. At its peak in 2018, South Korea commanded roughly 90% of global orders for large tanker vessels, a near total monopoly in this lucrative market segment. The industry employed approximately 230,000 workers and represented a crucial pillar of the national economy. Success seemed assured. But beneath the surface, structural problems were accumulating. The first crack appeared in the form of surging raw material costs, particularly iron ore. Steel plate is the fundamental building material for ships, and iron ore is the primary ingredient in steel production. When global iron ore prices began climbing sharply, the cost structure of shipbuilding was thrown into chaos. South Korean steel mills had traditionally supported domestic shipyards with favorable pricing, essentially subsidizing the maritime sector to maintain national industrial competitiveness. This arrangement worked well when iron ore prices remained stable. But as ore costs soared, steel producers found themselves squeezed between rising input expenses and stagnant prices for their output. They faced an impossible choice: continue absorbing losses to support shipbuilders, or raise prices and potentially destroy their largest customers. The steel industry ultimately decided it could no longer bear the burden. When mills increased prices to reflect their actual costs, shipyards saw their already thin profit margins evaporate entirely. Many contracts that had been signed months or even years earlier, with steel costs calculated based on old prices, suddenly became money-losing propositions. Some shipbuilders found themselves paying more for materials than they would receive for completed vessels. This cost crisis triggered a cascade of consequences. Unable to maintain profitability, shipyards began implementing drastic cost-cutting measures. Mass layoffs followed, reducing the skilled workforce that had been South Korea's greatest competitive advantage. From a peak of 230,000 employees, the sector's workforce collapsed to approximately 85,000, a catastrophic 63% decline. Losing experienced workers created a vicious cycle. Fewer skilled laborers meant slower production rates. Slower production meant delayed deliveries. Delayed deliveries damaged reputations and led to contract penalties. And diminished reputations made customers hesitant to place new orders with Korean yards, even when capacity was theoretically available. By the early 2020s, South Korea's shipbuilding industry had transformed from a world-beating powerhouse into a struggling sector plagued by backlogged orders, financial losses, workforce shortages, and increasingly desperate restructuring efforts. Some of the nation's most prestigious shipbuilders faced bankruptcy or required government intervention to survive. China's ascent: how the dragon became the dominant force. While South Korea wrestled with internal crises, China's shipbuilding sector continued its relentless expansion. The numbers tell a remarkable story of rapid market capture and technological advancement. In 2023, global shipbuilding orders totaled 41.49 million compensated gross tons, CGT, the standard measure used to compare different vessel types on an equivalent basis. South Korean shipbuilders secured 10.01 million CGT, representing 24% of the global total. Chinese yards, meanwhile, captured orders worth 24.46 million CGT, an astonishing 59% market share. Think about that figure for a moment. China now receives nearly 3 out of every 5 ship orders placed worldwide. For 3 consecutive years, Chinese shipbuilders have ranked first globally in new order volume, cementing their position as the industry's dominant force. Even more impressive is China's performance in specialized vessel categories. Consider LNG-powered ships, those environmentally advanced vessels using liquefied natural gas as fuel to reduce emissions. During the first 5 months of 2024, 40 such vessels were ordered globally. Chinese yards secured 35 of these contracts, 87.5% of the total market. South Korea managed only 3 orders, with Germany taking the remaining 2. This represents a complete reversal from just 15 years earlier, when China couldn't build even a single LNG carrier and South Korea monopolized the technology. Today, not only can China construct any type of vessel, but international customers actively prefer Chinese yards for the most technologically demanding projects. The Chinese advantage: why the world chooses Chinese ships. China's dominance isn't accidental. It results from deliberate strategic advantages that competitors find difficult to match. First, and most obviously, China possesses the world's largest labor force. This creates unparalleled flexibility in workforce management and enables genuine cost advantages that aren't simply about paying workers less. Chinese yards can scale production up or down based on demand, deploy workers across multiple projects simultaneously, and maintain deep benches of specialized expertise. South Korea, by contrast, faces genuine labor shortages, particularly of the experienced welders, engineers, and technicians required for complex vessel construction. Second, China has developed the world's most comprehensive and integrated shipbuilding supply chain. Everything from raw steel to electronic navigation systems, from specialized coatings to propulsion equipment, can be sourced domestically, often from facilities located near major shipyards. This vertical integration dramatically reduces both costs and lead times. South Korea must import many critical components, adding expense and complexity while creating supply chain vulnerabilities. Third, Chinese shipbuilders now offer extraordinary versatility. Major yards can construct essentially any civilian vessel type: bulk carriers for hauling raw materials, oil tankers, container ships in various sizes, gas carriers for LNG and LPG, specialized car carriers, chemical tankers, and more. This diversification allows yards to shift focus based on market conditions, reducing dependence on any single vessel category. It also makes Chinese shipbuilders attractive partners for shipping companies needing multiple vessel types, who can consolidate orders with a single builder. Fourth, the Chinese government provides systematic support that creates a favorable business environment. This includes infrastructure investments, research and development funding, favorable financing terms for both shipbuilders and ship buyers, and a regulatory framework designed to facilitate rather than hinder the industry's growth. While such support exists elsewhere, few countries match China's scale and consistency of maritime industrial policy. Finally, Chinese yards have mastered sophisticated production management techniques that maximize efficiency. Modern Chinese shipbuilding facilities employ advanced manufacturing technologies, digital design systems, and logistics optimization that rivals or even exceeds global best practices. The stereotype of Chinese manufacturing as low quality and inefficient is, honestly, decades out of date in sectors like shipbuilding. Global recognition. The world votes with its orders. The international maritime community has clearly recognized China's capabilities, as evidenced by high-profile orders from countries with sophisticated technical requirements and long histories of maritime excellence. Germany, a nation with its own proud shipbuilding heritage and traditionally fastidious about quality, ordered a series of new Panamax container ships from Chinese yards in 2024. This marked the first time in nearly a decade that German shipping companies had placed orders outside their traditional partnerships with South Korean and Japanese builders. For Chinese shipbuilders, this represented validation from one of the world's most demanding customer bases. Qatar, the Middle Eastern energy powerhouse with enormous LNG export infrastructure, has also pivoted toward Chinese maritime partnerships. The Qatari government and state-owned shipping companies signaled their intention to deepen cooperation with Chinese shipbuilders, while potentially reducing future orders to South Korean yards. Given Qatar's centrality to global LNG trade, this vote of confidence carries enormous weight. Even the United States, despite ongoing tensions with China across numerous sectors, has seen American shipping companies explore partnerships with Chinese yards for certain vessel types, though political considerations complicate such arrangements more than with other customers. These examples illustrate a broader pattern. The global maritime industry has concluded that Chinese shipbuilders offer not just acceptable quality at lower prices, but in many cases, world-leading technical capabilities, combined with competitive pricing and reliable delivery schedules. In an industry where ships represent investments of tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars and operational lifespans of 25 years or more, customers don't compromise on quality or capability. The fact that they're choosing Chinese yards in overwhelming numbers reflects genuine competitive superiority, not merely lower costs. South Korea's pragmatic response. If you can't beat them, buy from them. Against this backdrop, South Korea's decision to order vessels from Chinese shipyards becomes really quite comprehensible as a rational business decision rather than an embarrassing surrender. Hyundai Glovis faces genuine operational needs. The company operates one of the world's largest automobile logistics networks, moving vehicles from factories to dealerships across global markets. Their existing ship fleet is aging and must be replaced to maintain service levels and meet new environmental regulations. The company needs sophisticated car carriers with modern LNG dual-fuel propulsion, and it needs them delivered on predictable schedules. South Korean yards could theoretically build such ships, but the domestic industry faces the problems outlined earlier: workforce shortages, backlogged orders, cost challenges, and uncertain delivery timelines. Hyundai Glovis likely received quotes from Korean shipbuilders that were either uncompetitively priced, came with unacceptable delivery delays, or both. Chinese yards, by contrast, could offer competitive pricing, proven technical capability with LNG dual-fuel systems, and confidence in meeting delivery schedules. From a business perspective, the choice became obvious. Hyundai Glovis's primary obligation is to its shareholders and operational requirements, not to propping up domestic shipbuilders facing structural challenges. This pragmatism extends beyond a single company. Other South Korean firms with maritime needs will likely follow similar logic. If Chinese yards offer better value propositions, Korean companies will increasingly look across the Yellow Sea for their vessels, regardless of nationalistic sentiment or historical pride. Some Korean commentators have criticized these decisions as unpatriotic or as hastening domestic industry decline. But, corporations facing competitive global markets cannot afford to make purchasing decisions based on sentiment alone. If South Korean shipbuilders want to recapture domestic orders, they must solve their fundamental cost, workforce, and efficiency challenges, not rely on customer loyalty. Looking forward. China's path to complete dominance. Many industry analysts now predict that China will achieve essentially complete dominance over global commercial shipbuilding by the mid to late 2020s. Some believe this threshold has already been crossed in all but name. The data certainly supports such conclusions. With 59% market share already and momentum clearly in China's favor, it's difficult to envision scenarios where South Korea or Japan reclaim significant ground without dramatic interventions. The competitive advantages China has built in labor, supply chains, technological capability, government support, and production efficiency represent structural factors that competitors cannot easily replicate. South Korea's workforce challenges alone could require a generation to fully resolve, as rebuilding a skilled maritime manufacturing workforce of 200,000 or more would take decades of sustained investment and training. Japan faces similar demographic headwinds, with an aging population reducing the available pool of young workers who might enter shipbuilding careers. Meanwhile, China continues investing heavily in next-generation maritime technologies. Autonomous vessels, advanced propulsion systems, digital twins for ship operations, and integration with smart port infrastructure. Chinese shipbuilders aren't content with current dominance. They're positioning themselves to lead the industry's future evolution as well.